Hey everybody, welcome into another episode of Purple Insider and the final preseason post-game show. Matthew Coller here with you, of course. Dane Mizutani of the Pioneer Press as well. And that's it, Dane. The preseason is over. We'll have cut down day, and then we will finally play real football, and we can talk about real football things. But there actually is more to discuss about this game than, to tell you the truth, I expected.
Yeah.
Starting with Jaren Hall. So I feel like that's the best place to start, but we also have to talk about the wide receivers. We saw a lot of the guys that we think are competing for spots, what the usage of some players could potentially project. The highlight of the entire preseason, which was Kevin O'Connell on the broadcast, really terrific and a fun watch. And Will Reichard with an exclamation point at the end of this preseason with a 57-yard field goal. So let us begin with Jaren Hall. I thought he looked very good today, on point from start to finish. While the finish was not how you'd want it, of him taking a hit that maybe was a little aggressive for preseason, but overall, the best version of Jaren Hall we have ever seen in the preseason. Do you think that the Vikings will keep three quarterbacks, or that Jaren Hall's performance today will have any influence on that decision?
Yes, I do. Because yesterday I went into the day thinking there's no way they keep three. There's just going to be too many things elsewhere on the roster where you're going to need that roster spot. And you're just going to be able to sneak Jaren Hall onto the practice squad. 24 hours later, my tune's kind of changed. And I don't want to put too much stock into one preseason game, because I think we've been trained, or we've tried to train ourselves not to do that. I think Lewis Cine's a good example why we don't do that, why we don't put so much stock into one game that doesn't matter, where oftentimes backups or third stringers or fourth stringers are playing. So I'm trying my best not to do that with Jaren Hall. But the way he looked and just the level of comfort he had with the offense, I would just be, if I was the Vikings, a little nervous that someone might use a waiver claim. And if they did, then all of that work you've kind of put into a guy over 2 years, it's gone. And he's on a different team. And then you're searching for a practice squad quarterback elsewhere, or God forbid, Sam Darnold gets hurt, Nick Mullins gets hurt. I don't think if Jaren Hall has to play in NFL football games during the regular season, you're going to be in a good spot. But I think there's just enough there with the work they've put in. And what he showed today, I think he was 17 of 25 for 189 yards and 2 touchdowns, looked comfortable, progressed well, showed a little bit of wiggle in the pocket. Probably should have got rid of that last ball a little bit sooner than he did. But I thought there was enough there today to, if you're the Vikings, say it's not worth the risk. Let's just put him on the 53 and hope we can sneak a different position onto the practice squad, when Tuesday rolls around. So I thought it was a big day for him.
I agree with you. I do think it was a big day because he hasn't gotten almost any reps during practice, which also speaks well of him, that in the last game it was a little bit better. And then in his sort of big opportunity, if you will, in this one, he played the best football we've seen from him. Even last year during the third preseason game, he had some moments in the first half, but then some ugly moments in that game. Whereas this didn't have ugly moments. There was an interception that got called back for a penalty from the Eagles. So that didn't count. And there was even a really nice throw to Lucky Jackson that if he drags the other toe, that's a highlight reel level play. And it was a very accurate throw from Jaren Hall. The real question is exactly what you posed, which is, will someone else pick up Jaren Hall? Because he lives in an interesting space in the NFL that I think a lot of quarterbacks do, where he is good enough to potentially go out there and play football for your team without it being an entire wreck. Now, it was last year when he played against Green Bay, but I think after another year with him, that he knows the offense very well. He knows Kevin O'Connell well. He knows this team well, and he has enough talent to throw the ball accurately in the direction generally of where it's supposed to go. I don't think that he would win many football games if he got the chance. And if you had to play him over a long period, you would probably lose almost every game. So you don't want him to be in a position where he has to play a lot. And that's that weird space of, does he belong as a backup quarterback? Because usually the way you think of a backup quarterback is, could they win 40 or 50% of their games if they got in? Nick Mullins is below that, but at very least against Cincinnati and Detroit twice, Nick Mullins had them in each of those games with a chance to win if one thing goes a little bit better. That's what you expect from a backup quarterback. And I think Hall is not at the same level as a Nick Mullins where he could go in and give you a chance to win those games. But if you go out and get somebody else, if he were to be picked up by another team that maybe liked him coming out of the draft and has seen him in a couple of these preseason games, and maybe they have a quarterback injury and they say, well, we want our third quarterback, let's go pick up Jaren Hall and bring him in because we loved him back in the draft, or whatever, we see teams do this, then you do lose a couple of years of that development. You also lose somebody who knows your system, and then you have to bring in another quarterback. However, we are talking about Jaren Hall here. So if you get to the point where Jaren Hall plays, no matter who your third quarterback is, if it's him, if it's Tyler Thigpen back in the day, who was poached by the Kansas City Chiefs, you're in a lot of trouble anyway. And when you go through this 53-man roster, there are a lot of players who could end up on the field for this team, whether it's a backup defensive tackle, one more extra lineman, one more extra defensive back. Those guys could actually play in games versus if Jaren Hall plays, you're at extreme screwed levels and it doesn't really matter. So I don't know how they're going to approach it. I think either way, I would understand cutting him or not, because I still feel like if you cut him, teams are always more afraid than they should be of somebody else picking your guy up. That how many teams at this point are looking around going, hey, I guess we really need another quarterback. I guess that Jaren Hall guy would be great for us. There can't be too many teams that are looking for a quarterback 3, and he's not really qualified to be a quarterback 2. I think he could pretty easily get to the practice squad. And then next year, you have a legitimate backup competition with him and somebody else, assuming that they move on from Nick Mullins after this year and have J.J. McCarthy as their starting quarterback. But I thought today he looked really comfortable and really threw the ball on time and accurately, which is what they've been looking for from him for these last couple of years in developing him. And that was just big for him making his case.
Yeah, and the fact that we're even having this discussion speaks to how good of a game he had today, I think, and speaks to kind of how much he's grown over the course of his NFL career to this point. If Jaren Hall came out there and looked like Matt Corral today, then we'd say they're going to cut him on Tuesday and he's going to get to the practice squad, and there wouldn't be any of that discourse. And the only reason we're talking about that is because, to his credit, in his big opportunity, as we're calling it, he balled out. He performed really at a high level. And we can split hairs and say, well, he was going up against, this guy or that guy or whatever. Cooper DeJean was out there when Jaren Hall, and he was a first-round pick. I know he hasn't had much training camp, but it wasn't just a bunch of third, fourth stringers out there either. So he performed at a high enough level. But I think your point about if someone's signing Jaren Hall, it's probably not to be their backup is probably a good way to frame this, because at the end of the day, it would be someone poaching him off of your, the waiver claim wire to be their third string quarterback. Probably unrealistic when you break down, because that would take away another roster spot from another team. And presumably they have players on the back end that they want to hold on to. So there probably is something to what you kind of said all along, which is teams are more worried to lose their guys than they should be. But I think that worry is probably just going to weigh enough with Kevin O'Connell, who loves quarterbacks and really values knowledge of his system. I think on Tuesday when it rolls around, probably partially because of this game, but also largely because of just the knowledge he's had, the growth he's made, I think Jaren Hall will be on the team.
Yeah, and when I did my 53, I said no to Jaren Hall being on the team just because I thought they'll be able to get him through
Yeah.
to the practice squad with no trouble. And I think I still kind of think that,
Yeah.
even though he had this game, when there's preseason action, we always want to have bigger takeaways than maybe it is. Like, he was always going to play, and the Eagles, even though they were playing Cooper DeJean, they weren't playing a lot of other guys. But what I thought was really good for Jaren Hall is, if we're calling it making his case, was that a lot of his good throws were legitimately good throws.
Yeah.
They weren't. There was one to Lucky Jackson where no one was around, and there was a swing pass he threw to Dwayne McBride where no one was around, and he went for like 20 yards. But there were also some very legitimate throws. I think my favorite of the day was when he whipped one to N'Keal Harry down the seam, and it showed a little bit of juice on the fastball when he was able to drop straight back, hit the back foot, throw on time, and hit N'Keal Harry down the seam. Like, that's the type of pass that you would make in a real game. That ball is open a lot, but it's not the easiest throw to make. And he was able to make that and hit him right there. And I think if Harry had kind of caught it a little bit more upright as opposed to falling backward, I mean, he might have run all the way for another 10 yards or a touchdown. That's a really good throw. The touchdown pass to Tristan Jackson, who we need to talk about, was another really good throw. That's something in breaking across the middle. It's got to be timed out correctly. It's got to be accurate. And I just want to give Jaren Hall, either way, I don't know what they're going to do with him. I just want to give Jaren Hall a heck of a lot of credit for this entire time, because sometimes when you get brought in as a draft pick, even if you're a late round pick, and they talk about, yeah, we're going to develop this guy, we're going to give him his shot, and then he actually gets to start a game that following season. And I wondered about this early on in training camp. Is Jaren Hall going to be broken by this? Because they went and drafted another guy. They brought back Nick Mullins. They didn't cut him. And you're just kind of QB4. Mm-hmm. You are way down on that depth chart. And then his first appearance in the Raiders game, well, he did get a game-winning drive. It looked pretty gnarly in that first game. So then you get into the next game, he's a little better. And then this game, he was really terrific from the entire time that he was in there playing, not just in the third quarter, not just in the fourth quarter, but against the Eagles guys who were trying to make the team, and handling it with that type of professionalism, the way Kevin O'Connell talks about him. And he went out of his way through the entire training camp to bring up Jaren Hall as a piece of that quarterback room. And I feel like the dynamics of a quarterback room are important. To have a kid who's pretty mature. I know that he's only in his second year, but I think he's like 26. So he's mature. He's learned the offense over 2 years. And those three guys, and McCarthy's going to be in there as well, have done this entire thing together with the offense. And that matters at least a little to trying to keep him around. So whether they do go 2 or 3, I still feel like you could get him to the practice squad. I still feel like if you get to the third quarterback on any team, you are in deep trouble with your season, and it's probably pretty much over anyway. But should he have to be thrown into a random situation, you feel like he could at least execute the offense to some extent, and it wouldn't be a complete atrocity, and he could play NFL football. I think we did see him make progression from where he was otherwise. Now, so let's talk about the wide receivers.
Yeah.
Interesting enough that they were playing all three of them that I considered fighting for 1 or 2 spots, which is Tristan Jackson, Trent Sherfield, and Lucky Jackson, who had a very good game today. Maybe toe tap that one, and we're talking about Lucky Jackson having a great game, a good punt return back there. Are you thinking 5 receivers? Are you thinking 6 receivers? What combination of those 3 guys do you think end up making this team? Because I don't think we got that answer based on playing time today, since they were all out there.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking 6 receivers. And I've kind of just felt this, like, we'll just go through the list. Justin Jefferson, obviously. Jordan Addison, obviously. Jalen Naylor did not suit up today because he's wide receiver 3. Just an awesome training camp for that guy. And then we get into, like, Brandon Powell, he's making the team too. So that's 4, which leaves spots for maybe 1, maybe 2. I think Tristan Jackson, like, if he's not making the team, what else does he have to do? He's had an awesome training camp. All he does is ball out in practice. He had a touchdown reception in each game, and he just continues to flash. and he's a guy who knows the system. He's a guy everyone loves. He's a guy who's had some NFL, spot appearances here and there. Like I have him definitely making the team. So like with everything we've seen, and if he doesn't make the team, I would be surprised. And, frankly, a little bit like, what are we doing here? Because we take this entire sample size of training camp in the summer. And if you're just taking that sample size, not many players have performed better than Tristan Jackson. So that's 5 right there. Because if we're going Jefferson, Addison, Naylor, Powell, and Tristan Jackson, 5. And I'm landing at 6 because the way they just talk about Trent Sherfield. Like, just listen to Kevin O'Connell talk about Trent Sherfield. Just listen to Wes Phillips talk about Trent Sherfield. And I think it kind of tells you everything you need to know. They really like that he brings a different element to that receiver room. He brings a sense of physicality. He brings the willingness to block. Even Justin Jefferson the other day said, when asked about Trent Sherfield blocking, he said, well, somebody has to do it. And he laughed, almost implying, well, I'm not going to do it. JJ's a complete receiver. He's willing to do all those things. But I think Trent Sherfield has a spot on this roster just because he offers something a little different. I don't know how functionally that'll play out during the regular season. If like Trent Sherfield's on the field and they're running the ball, like you better be a hell of a blocker if you're Trent Sherfield, because that might be kind of a dead giveaway that it's going to be a run. But I've always kind of thought he has a spot too. So then we're at 6. They're not going to keep 7, but Lucky Jackson, man, he's had a good training camp too. He flashes during games. He's certainly separated himself from like all the other like conglomerate of random receivers that are also on this team. So like if Lucky Jackson doesn't make it simply because of numbers, it wasn't for like a lack of like good performances on his part. I think even if he taps the toe today, he's probably on the outside looking in just because they can't keep 7 receivers. Maybe they'll shock me and do it. But I think it's 6, and I think Lucky Jackson's probably the odd man out there.
The biggest thing with Trent Sherfield, aside from the toughness element that he brings, and he's got a lot of catches throughout his career, and he has played this type of role, but also if you look at his special teams history, he has played a ton of special teams, whereas Tristan Jackson has a lot less actual NFL experience than Trent Sherfield has. So that toughness element and that strength element shows up in having to tackle people sometimes, having to block people sometimes, because if you're not the punt or kick returner, you're doing a lot of the grindy, gritty work that Trent Sherfield has been willing to do throughout his career to keep him on an NFL roster. I think that's been big for him, even staying in the league. And that's something that I imagine Matt Daniels is going to want, but it's not like he can't catch the football. I mean, he's had a 30 catch season before in his career. So if they do stuff where they want to run the ball and have Trent Sherfield blocking, but well, they can also throw him the football. And we've seen him make a number of catches. To your point about Tristan Jackson, so, of course, the best camps we've ever seen have come from Stephon Diggs and from Justin Jefferson. But in this category of the battling for back end, it's number 1. I have never seen a guy have such a good training camp in preseason who's battling for a 4, 5, 6 spot as Tristan Jackson. And I agree with you. If this doesn't get it done, then this all means absolutely nothing. And they decide before training camp who's making the team. And I did think it was telling that Kevin O'Connell on the broadcast said that he was somebody that they identified back with the Rams in 2020, and they actually brought him to the Rams. He was on their practice squad. The Vikings ended up picking him up when Zimmer was here, and he survived the Zimmer and all the way to now. This guy's been in the league for like 5 years, fighting this fight to finally get his chance. I'd really like to see it happen. He is one of the most liked players on the team. I think he matters to that wide receiver room. They all seem to root for him a lot. Justin Jefferson excitedly talked about him the other day as someone who they're all kind of rooting for and cheering for. But the guy makes plays. He gets open. He tracks the ball well. He's somebody that if you had Jalen Naylor go out, no one's going to replace Jefferson. No one's going to replace Addison. Those guys are freak first-round draft picks. They're in a different category. Side note, Kenny Pickett. Wow. You really owe Jordan Addison for that first round bonus that you got, because Kenny Pickett is awful. What are we talking about? How was this man a first round draft? Oh yeah, because Jordan Addison caught everything that year. So the little hand quarterback from Pitt did not look like a first round draft pick at all today, but Jordan Addison really good. Aside from that though, what Jalen Naylor does, Tristan Jackson also does. The kind of fast downfield guy, ball tracking stuff. And I think that there's different roles there for everybody. So there should probably be 6. And I also don't think that Lucky Jackson's a guy you would lose to anyone. No. He looks like somebody that you could keep around the practice squad. Just going kind of through the positions here, the offensive line, Tyrese Robinson, Michael Juergens. I didn't think there was any sort of big takeaway from the offensive line. So you kind of nodded that you agree there. How about on the defense? Lewis Cine still out there in the last snap. Not exactly the impact game he had against the Cleveland Browns. He committed, I think, 2 penalties, missed a tackle in there. It wasn't actually Lewis Cine that raised an eyebrow for me that was still playing in the fourth quarter because I expected that. I did not think what he did last week was going to change anybody's mind after a 3-year sample of seeing him. Jay Ward, though, playing deep into this game. That made me wonder if Jay Ward is going to stick around in this defensive back group. Did you have the same thought or other takeaways about the defensive snap counts?
Yeah. I guess we'll start with Lewis Cine. Like, this is kind of a weird, very, very online like reference, but there's this meme with Tyra Banks like yelling, and it's a scene from America's Next Top Model where she's yelling at one of her contestants saying, "We wanted this for you. We all wanted this for you." And I think that's what Vikings fans are feeling right now with Lewis Cine, because everyone wanted him to string together another awesome performance. And as we kind of tried to put water on that fire last week, like he would have needed to have like 25 tackles today and 3 pick sixes to like, I think, really push himself over the edge. I'm only exaggerating a little. Instead, I think he had like 2 tackles. He was basically invisible, had a very like egregious missed tackle, and then followed it up with the pass interference penalty. I think it's done for him. I think we can stop talking about him. I think your point about Jay Ward is correct. I've kind of felt this throughout training camp that they want it for Jay Ward. The coaching staff wants it to, give him every opportunity. Bumped him down from safety to corner, pretty much exclusively has played corner for the last 3 weeks. He got a pick today on a tip ball, but like the fact that he's out there, I think probably means he is in that conversation of, okay, like you tell me which guy, like when all the coaches stand on the table and say, I need this guy, like I think someone is going to need to ride pretty hard for Jay Ward because I think there's other guys out there, Dwight McGlothern, who probably are ahead of him at this point with where they think, they could ascend to at their point, at different points in their career. Dwight McGlothern had a great game last week, and he had a sneaky good play this week. It was a 4th down, and he just aggressively kind of comes in off the edge, and he makes a physical tackle in the backfield to force a turnover on downs. I think if you're Brian Flores, you like seeing that. This guy is a guy that you have talked about who has good ball skills. Well, he's showing the willingness to kind of go up there and be physical at the line of scrimmage. I think Dwight McGlothern's ahead of Jay Ward. And the only other thing I thought that was a little bit interesting was that Caleb Evans played kind of a lot. Are we sure he's not like a surprise cut candidate? Because like if you are going through the list of players that are going to make this team at cornerback, you obviously have Stephon Gilmore, Shaq Griffin, Byron Murphy Jr. But like then you start to get in that group. Like Brian Flores loves veterans. He loves guys that have proven this. Fabian Moreau seems pretty safe to me. And then if you keep going down the list, like if you're only keeping 5 and it's between Caleb Evans and Dwight McGlothern, well, maybe you just take a shot on the younger kid who you think's a little bit more moldable. I would still be a little bit surprised if Caleb Evans was cut, but the fact that he was playing in the preseason finale, like that stuck out to me a little bit. And I think it's possible that it might be the end of the road. We'll see here on Tuesday.
And if I saw it correctly, Also, Fabian Morrow was out there as
Correct.
somebody who has played a lot of football in his career, and they were still putting him out there in this preseason game. Now, I know you have to play someone. Like, you can't.
Yeah, that's true.
They have to play him, but they could have started Jay Ward at corner and just said, whatever, let's just see how he could play. And instead, Morrow was out there, which made me think that they wanted to get a tiny bit of a look at a couple of things with him and maybe how far along he is with the defense. But there is a discussion now in the cornerback group of, is it McGlothern and Evans or Morrow? Is McGlothern still going to get cut and they hope to get him through to the practice squad? Because McGlothern didn't come out there until the other guys were already out there. But that might mean the opposite of what we think, because of Caleb Evans being out there as much as he was raises an eyebrow where you go, this is a guy who's played in the league now for several seasons. We've also seen, by the way, this coaching staff and this general manager cut an entire draft class because was a 2021 class that had Kellen Mond, Wyatt Davis, and they just cleared all those guys out. That was the Amir Smith-Marset. And after camp, they just said, "No, you're all gone. You're cut." It's like you talk about the memes, the Homer Simpson, cut, you're cut. Same kind of thing. That might be the same with this 2022 class. Brian Asamoah still out there playing a ton of reps at linebacker, even though they've got a couple other linebackers that they could have, that they could play more. And I still liked Dallas Gant again. I think he's a guy that they want to make sure they keep on the practice squad, but he's made plays in every one of these games, even though he doesn't get a ton of opportunity in the actual practices because you're playing your other guys. I would be surprised if they cut Asamoah, but he sure played a lot. I'd be surprised if they cut Evans, but he sure played a lot today. And we know this from Kevin O'Connell, that traditionally has not been a great sign for you. And now with Stephon Gilmore, they have one extra spot there. Somebody's not getting on the boat in that cornerback group. And I'm not exactly sure who it's going to be. But if they cut a Caleb Evans, I would understand it, because last year he got off to an okay start, was playing all right. But then the way that he collapsed at the end of the season and what we've seen from him in training camp, and I know the type of receivers he's going up against, so it's not fair. But also when you play in the NFL, you play against guys like Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Like, a lot of teams have them. You're going to face Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell and Brandon Ayuk, presumably, and Deebo Samuel. You're going to face all these guys. And if you're just getting roasted all the time, as he was throughout training camp, I guess I would wonder if they saw that and said, you know what, we're just going to try again next time with young corners and stick with all of the veterans. How about Andre Carter was out there a ton. He was getting a sack at the very end. Andre Carter came along with a lot of intrigue last year as the undrafted free agent guy. You know who else got a ton of work was Levi Drake Rodriguez, but I think it's for different reasons, or maybe it's for the same reason, because Andre Carter is a development type player who is supposed to be raw and they've brought along. Levi Drake Rodriguez needs reps. They praise the heck out of him. I still think he's going to make the team. But Andre Carter, I'm not as sure. There was one time where he had a really nice strip sack to start the second half, but there were other times where he needed to stick somebody in the run game and they just pushed him out of the way and kept on moving. What do you think of the back end of that outside linebacker group with Andre Carter playing as much as he did?
I don't see it with Andre Carter. Like, I don't see a way or a road for him making the team, just because when you get to that back end of the outside linebackers room, that's like number 51, 52, 53 on the roster. So you're kind of splitting hairs between other positions that might take precedent, over the sixth edge rusher. So, like, I think Jihad Ward's making the team for sure. And I think Patrick Jones is making the team for sure. And I think they might just be content to roll with 5 there. And I've kind of felt that way throughout camp, watching Andre Carter. Like, it is hard in training camp to kind of decipher like how good of a practice an edge rusher or defensive end has had. And Andre Carter has made a number of plays throughout the preseason, which matters. Like, he was involved today, and I think last week he was involved on a play that was maybe a safety, but it ended up not being a safety. I think Brian Asamoah got the tackle in the end zone in Cleveland, but Andre Carter generated the pressure. he is a guy who Kevin O'Connell has kind of gone out of his way to praise. You heard it on the broadcast today too, when Kevin O'Connell was mic'd up. He was talking about Levi Drake Rodriguez, but he was also talking about Andre Carter. And that goes back to the sometimes if you just listen to what these guys are saying, they'll tell you. So maybe Kevin O'Connell likes Andre Carter. I just can't see a way that he makes the team given, the numbers crunch that you're going to be under on Tuesday. But I do think that the fact that he's playing so late in the preseason finale isn't as good of a sign as it is for Levi Drake Rodriguez, or doesn't mean the same thing. I'm with you with Levi Drake Rodriguez. He's a 7th round pick who, you need to see more of, because you didn't see a lot of him at Texas A&M Commerce, and you don't know what he can really do. So him getting a lot of reps is not the same as a guy, Andre Carter, who you invested a lot in as a UDFA last year, and it never really materialized. And now you're still trying to see what you have in him late in the preseason finale. Those two things don't mean the same thing to me. And I think it might end with Andre Carter getting cut on Tuesday. But the voice in the back of my head still thinks like, well, Kevin O'Connell keeps mentioning him. So if he keeps mentioning him, he must like him a little. Is that going to be enough to tip the scales? I guess we'll see here in like 48, 72 hours.
That is always the hard thing to figure out. Why is the guy out there? Is it because he is a developmental player and they think that he just needs these reps and they'd love to see him get some confidence? And if all goes right, I mean, think about the guys they have at edge rusher. Andre Carter's not playing this year. Special teams, he could play a lot. I've seen him out there on a lot of the kickoffs and things like that, which could be a difference maker. I took it a little bit more the development way, even though I have felt the same way as you, where I didn't see impact play in training camp all that much, but he has had some good moments in the preseason game. I guess I've got that one circled as I'm interested to figure this out. Yeah. And another thing too, is that we all wrote the story about Gabriel Murphy making an early impact as the UDFA. And look, they're doing it again with these UDFAs. And then Murphy gets hurt. We haven't heard boo about him since, and Kevin O'Connell has not talked about whatever injury it is for Murphy. He's kind of deflected that one, which I think is interesting because he's usually, if it's a non-serious injury, willing to say, hey guys, don't worry too much about that one. Or if it's serious, they'll say, yeah, we're pretty sad that this guy's going to be out for a long time. And it hasn't been either one with Murphy, which makes you wonder what's happening there. But that makes me think that Carter makes the team because you would have your core 4 guys. Jihad Ward started this game. I still have him on the team. He was in some of their third down packages against Cleveland, which made me think he was just playing to get a few more reps in there at a certain position, that he could even be somebody who mixes in on a certain type of package. And then Carter would be the guy after that. And I'm not sure who else would take that position unless they have, a thought on Murphy coming back. But they would have had to have done a lot with very little with Gabriel Murphy as far as seeing what he brought to the table and then putting him on the 53. But that's one that we're going to be watching very closely. Now, let's talk about this kicker. Let's talk about this kicker. Will Reichard had one heck of a training camp and one heck of a preseason. His only miss deserves the finger quote miss, because it's not really. It just got blocked when everyone fell down. But when everyone did not fall down, he made every kick, and they sent him out there for the 57-yarder, bang right through with the 57-yarder. I mean, I think that Will Reichard had a dream scenario training camp and preseason. When you draft a kicker, I know that all of us, including me, said, I don't love it. I know it's a 6th round draft pick, so I'm not going to assault anyone over it. But the history of drafting kickers isn't always great. I think Cade York was a fairly high draft pick. Yep. He just got traded. You saw this with Roberto Aguayo. There's been a lot of them that have been drafted and haven't worked out. But as of this moment, he had maybe the best training camp and preseason that I have covered from any kicker, start to the very end, with him kicking that 57-yarder today. And I don't know where the questions came from about the leg strength, because people made him sound like he was late career Gary Anderson. If you need a 42-yard field goal, you're great. But if he has to kick it from far, you're screwed. That is not what we've seen in practice. And that certainly wasn't the case there. That one was good from 60 plus.
Yeah. 57-yard field goal to cap it off, and he just bangs it home. It's a microcosm of camp so far. And I think the point about never draft a kicker, like I generally skew on that side and that school of thought as well. Like, don't draft a kicker. You can find one. And Brandon Aubrey from the Cowboys, they just found him. Like, he played soccer and he's out here kicking 70-yard field goals. But if you're going to draft a kicker, like, it's really awesome that he had maybe, like you said, the best training camp that you can remember of any kicker. And I think I would agree with that. Like, there's a lot of times, just to set the scene of training camp, where we're standing there on the sideline, we're watching a quote unquote kicking competition unfold, with whether it was Dan Bailey or Kari Vedvik or, Daniel Carlson in the past. And it's just okay. Like, some days it's like, wow, this guy's really good. And some days it's like they missed 4 field goals today. I think by my count, Will Reichard missed 4 field goals in practice all training camp. There were 2 missed field goals. What is today? Saturday, yesterday in the rain. It was Thursday. There were 2 missed field goals Thursday. They had like a scrimmage type of thing, and it was pouring rain. He missed 2 field goals there. He also missed 2 field goals like the first week of training camp. They were like 50-yard like bombs that he didn't bang home. But other than that, I think Kevin Seifert's been doing like a live tracking of every single kick Will Reichard's taken. I think he's like 32 of 36, which is significant. Like, that's a big sample size. All the kicks he's taking throughout training camp, and he's nailing them. I do need to see it in the regular season to fully believe it, but there's no reason that you walk out of this training camp feeling anything but great about what the Vikings have with them, at kicker right now. And you can't say that very often about this franchise. So I think it's significant. I thought it was fitting that, the whole thing, we got to see it culminate with a 57-yard field goal today. I think they have a kicker that is going to be around for a really long time. And I'm sure if things go sideways, someone will cut this clip up and I will be on freezing cold takes. But I don't care. I'm willing to go there. He's special. I think he's going to be someone who we look at as a guy who could probably have this job for a while.
Trying to figure out, based on training camp and preseason, if a guy's going to make 87% or 92% of his kicks is pretty hard. But I think what we can clear out from an outcome is him making 67% of his kicks. Like, we've seen enough to be able to say this guy is an NFL kicker at very least, with just his pure talent for lacing the ball down the middle of the uprights over and over and over and over again. In training camp, his accuracy from 50 plus is exceptional. They should be able to trust him going out there. And the rest is hard to say. I mean, we knew, and Greg Joseph was a fine NFL kicker for the most part. He had some yips on those extra points, but he had a good training camp one year. I don't think it was this good, but it was pretty decent. And he went out and had a pretty average season. Daniel Carlson, we saw him miss a lot in training camp back in 2018, and that carried over pretty quickly as well. So I'm willing to say that it's not absurd to suggest that Will Reichard can really do this at an NFL level and that they should have some confidence in him. And we're going to see what the gap is between the real games and now. The pressure certainly goes up from the fourth quarter of a game like this against Philadelphia to actually playing in Philadelphia or actually playing at US Bank Stadium when everybody needs you to hit a 57-yarder to win a game. But the return's very good on Will Reichard, and we'll have to see where it goes from here. They should just walk out very, very happy. Now, I want to get to some questions, comments. So if you want to throw some in, I'm going to scroll through in a moment. But we need to discuss the highlight of the preseason.
Oh my gosh.
Hands down, best moments of the preseason were today when Kevin O'Connell was on the mic. I thought this was a tremendous idea from Vikings Entertainment to get him on the microphone. And I figured that O'Connell, because he just loves explaining and talking about football, and he's really good as a talker, that this would be great. But what I didn't anticipate, I thought he was just going to walk away give the headset to somebody else, just do the interview and answer PA's questions. No, he's coaching the game. I did not expect him to continue to coach the game. And it was just tremendous. The challenges he's taken us through, the hit on Jaren Hall where he's trying to mute the microphone. We're hearing him talk to the referee. We're hearing him get worked up. And then him saying, all right, guys, we got to watch number 47 on the other side, that linebacker, 57. He's the one that could blow up this play. Oh, we didn't get that block. Like, watch that. I need Kevin O'Connell coaching the game and broadcasting all the time. That was a great idea, super well executed. And I thought it brought us inside the game as much as anything that any broadcast has ever done.
It was phenomenal. It was awesome television. And that's not something you say very often in the preseason finale after halftime. But I had that moment circled from the moment it was announced this week, because you just knew he was going to be good. He's so good at talking. He's very eloquent with the way he can describe football. But he even exceeded my expectations with how good he was, at times, because I thought it was kind of a toss-up. It's a, this or that debate for which was better. Like, was it better watching him just like call plays in real time, say, hey, watch what's going to happen here. Like, everyone fell in love with how Tony Romo was doing it. Like, when he was kind of the darling of media broadcasting. But Kevin O'Connell was like a step further, like in the way, like the intricacies that he would describe. Tony Romo would just guess, I think it's going to be a fade here. And then it would be. And everyone's like, oh my God. Like, Kevin O'Connell is giving high level breakdowns of what's happening in real time to people who like will never have this like throughout the season, obviously. So it was such a cool moment. But I thought the coolest moment was probably just watching him interact like with people that are around him in his like actual space, like his arena. I thought there was going to be, like you, a moment where he just took a step to the side and said, yeah, like I'm mic'd up. I'm going to hang out here on the 20. Like, no, he was right in his arena the whole time. And I thought it was tremendous television. I tweeted it when Jaren Hall got lit up on a play that probably should have drew a flag. At the very least, it's like, don't do that if you're the defender. The guy comes in like a missile and nails him, in the red zone. And I thought Kevin O'Connell was going to swear on camera. Instead, he says, give me a second, guys. Basically rips his headset off and goes over and talks to the referee. I thought that was really cool. It was cool to see it kind of in real time, because we see it, occasionally in practice. We can see him get fired up. But just like to get a real peek behind the curtain of what it's like to watch him, on the sideline. When we're in the press box, we can see like he looks animated here. He's going to challenge this play. But we can't hear the discussions that are actually happening. So I thought it was really cool. I would love if they did that like once a preseason. I would circle it on the calendar, because I thought he was awesome. I think that's something they need to continue to try and capitalize on moving forward. You're not going to get it in the regular season, obviously. It's too important. But there's a real opportunity there, and he was really good at it.
The only feedback I would give them, and I would have done the same thing, so this is not a criticism, but once it was going the way it was going, don't even ask him questions.
Yeah, stop talking. Yep.
Just let him do color analysis down from the sideline.
Yep.
Just call the game and then let him talk. Because trying to mix in, hey, what do you think of Tristan Jackson? What do you think of Matt Corral? I thought that made it, he couldn't really get a complete answer out because there was always something popping up. And that's what I mean. I didn't know he was going to be continuing to coach the game, but him coaching the game and just talking you through what he was seeing, he took us through how it works when there's a challenge. That he's talking to Ryan Cordell, who's their pass game coordinator and their game management specialist, I think is his official title. So he's up in the box and Kevin says over his headphones, hey, what happened there? Did he get there? And then Ryan Cordell is saying down to him, no, he didn't get there. We got to challenge it, throw the flag. So of course we always are criticizing coaches for their decisions on throwing the challenge flag, but this is a full coaching staff effort of how they go about it. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of people make their brands on criticizing coaches and stuff like that. And we all do this in games, but you see how much of an effort for the full coaching staff it is. You also got just a little taste of the chaos that's going on, because he's talking about, and I loved every moment of this, by the way, he's talking about these, what Ivan Pace is like out on the field. Get him off the field. Like, where's our coach that's supposed to keep these guys off the field?
Yeah.
There's so many things happening. And for him to be able to hear the calls in one ear, hear PA in the other ear, and focus on both things was so impressive, because I don't know how you do that. I could not do that. I mean, my wife, who does play-by-play, she has a producer pop in her ear while she's doing play-by-play, tell her when to go to break and stuff like that. I don't even know how she does that, much less to hear the actual broadcast and Wes Phillips and be able to say, all right, here's what Wes is calling here. Here's what we're trying to accomplish on this play. Those types of things. That was something that I've never seen before on a broadcast. And I think that the Rams did it. I just didn't catch it with McVay, but it offered a window into all the things that are happening at once, all the people who are coming over and saying something to KOC. Here's what we got going on. Different guys they're trying to get in the game, different things they're accomplishing. And I even love the part where he said, I'd really like Ryan Wright to be able to pin him down there, because possession matters and ball position still matters. And I also thought after Ryan Wright shanked one that it might have been on his mind. I'd really like you to bounce back here, because I think they're still on shaky ground with the punter. And I also wonder if they're going to look at any other punters who get cut down. But that type of stuff there's only one person who can give it to you, and it's the head coach of the team, this type of insight. And for them to be able to pull that off, the audio was good, which I wondered about. Sometimes you see coaches in in-game interviews and you can't hear them, or they're not paying attention. And so for him to do that, and it seemed like he was putting in the effort, like, I'm going to actually take you through what's happening here. It was just great from top to bottom.
Yeah, it was so good. And like, I appreciated how he wanted to give insight. Like, sometimes with coaches, you get it where it's like, how can we say the least? But like, he would even, like, when asked about Levi Drake Rodriguez, immediately steer it back to football. Like, he was steering us back to the good stuff on, in real time. And one, I think that's probably how his brain is wired, like during the actual game, like when he has calls in his ear and he has questions being asked, like the calls take precedent. So he probably wants to talk about what's actually going on in his brain. But I thought it was cool just watching him totally be willing to like let the guard down and give us that insight. And I thought it was, if fans haven't seen it, like, it's literally worth going back and watching the entire third quarter, because it was that good. And I don't think we ever say that about these on the field interviews that happen during games. No disrespect to Harrison Smith, but you didn't have to go back and watch him talk to PA last week when he was on during the game against the Cleveland Browns. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, same way. Justin Jefferson, same way. They caught him in a cool moment in week 1 where he got to watch his best friend catch a touchdown. But other than that, it wasn't high level like you need to go back and watch. Kevin O'Connell's was, and I'll stress it again, like, they got to figure out a way to do this again. Like, next preseason, every preseason game, like, Kevin O'Connell doesn't care about the preseason. Like, he does, but I'm saying that a little bit tongue in cheek, but like, I think you could get him to do this. I think you could convince him to do it, because I think he enjoys this a little bit. Like, he's giving play calling duties to Wes. He's obviously coaching the football team, but I think there is like an avenue to make this not just a one-off thing. I hope he enjoyed it as much as I did, because I want to see this again.
And I think it matters to Kevin O'Connell, and he said this before, and I think I know this to be true, that it matters the connection between the team and the fans. And I think he felt like this is an opportunity for me to bring the fans who are watching a little bit more inside of my world and inside the game. And every coach is going to say, we love our fans. But when you do something like this and put in the effort and not just try to blow off PA and answer stuff off of whatever cue card or whatever, really do it though, really engage in it. I think it does say that he cares about the fans feeling like they have that connection to the team. So A+ across the board. I think that they should absolutely do that again. Let me get to some questions, comments for about 10 minutes or so. I think it would be absurd to go more than an hour on a preseason game when it's 85 degrees out and the fair is going on for everybody. So, but look at this. Talk about the fan. We have a huge audience here right now, which is amazing. How jacked are every single one of you about football? It's almost here. It's almost here. We're almost there. But I can't make you stay for more than 10 minutes on a nice day like this. That would just be wrong. So let's get a few questions in or comments. Sean says, I lean toward letting Hall go to the practice squad. Would suck to lose him, but there are too many defensive end, interior D, or even wide receivers that need to be protected. That's my point, Dane. No disrespect to Jaren Hall. I think he was great today, and he's handled this like a complete pro, but there's just too many other guys that I could see either developing that you want to keep around or just making an impact this season.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like my takeaway of like, do I think he's going to be on the roster is kind of through the prism of like, how do I think Kevin O'Connell is going to think? If I was putting together a roster, I would just take the risk, because I agree there are people in that tier of player where you are cutting down between, 52, 53, 54th man, like that could probably make a bigger impact now and later for the, this franchise as a whole. So if I was choosing, I would put Jaren Hall, hope to sneak him onto the practice squad. I just think that the head coach at the end of the day loves his quarterbacks, loves and values knowledge in the system. And so that's why I'm going to have him on.
Zoomer Kev says, do preseason wins speak more to coaching or depth? The answer for me is neither. I have never cared about a preseason record. I never will care about a preseason record. When they went 13-4, I think they lost every single preseason game. And had they lost all of these, I would not have even brought up the score. I think, did we even bring up the score so far today? It doesn't matter at all. This is entirely about what the preseason says about the certain players. And it's about confirming things that you see in camp, like Reichard kicking field goals when he's been very good in training camp, and maybe trying to figure out and unearth what they're thinking about certain guys for cutdown day. But it's not about results very much for me. Definitely not at all. And I don't think that it says anything really about whether you have good coaching or depth. I that's just, the preseason is so meaningless to so many coaches, including, we're talking about Kevin O'Connell being on the broadcast. Like, is he trying to win the game? I guess, like, he was trying during the moments he was on, but if he had lost, I don't think he would have been heartbroken to have lost the game. I've never seen him upset after a preseason loss before, or any other coach. These are exhibitions to try to get a look at some depth. And I also don't think it speaks to depth, because the first line of defense, all of your starters, they will determine whether you win or lose all the football games in the regular season. And your second line are not even playing that much in these games. Those guys will also have some role, and it's a smaller one, but some role in how you play in the regular season. But those guys are only getting a handful of snaps during these situations. Actual meaningful backups like Jalen Naylor, who is a role player, wide receiver 3, that guy's sitting today. Yeah. And so I just can't take any part of this seriously from a results perspective. I kind of usually like to focus on what it means about a player too, like we've talked about with Jaren Hall.
Yeah. And I think Jaren Hall is a good example of why preseason doesn't matter. Like, do the Vikings like the fact that the score was 26-3? Did they like that they won the game? Yeah, I'm sure they were happy. But if Jaren Hall looked like he did in the first half and Matt Corral came in and threw 9 pick sixes and they lost by 50, I think they'd still walk away feeling pretty good about this preseason game because of what they saw from Jaren Hall. So does not matter. I think everyone within that locker room would agree, does not matter. Who cares about the preseason results? All that matters is what you see on the field in the exhibitions that we talk about.
A couple things regarding the wide receivers. Janet says, can Sherfield take a tight end spot? Chris says maybe trade Powell and gets draft. He says draft picks. That would be incredible if they got draft picks for Brandon Powell. And Zoomer Kev says, I assume they want Thayer Thomas to stick around. So just in order there, they could put TJ Hawkinson on IR to return. This is something new that you can do. You used to have the guy on the 53, then you could put him on the shorter term IR. Now you can do it on cut down day, so you can keep him. It's like having a 54th player. They're going to do that, I'm almost sure, with Hawkinson. So in a way, Sherfield does sort of take up a tight end spot, having 6 wide receivers, and they could push that decision on the receivers down the road. I would not trade Brandon Powell. I like Brandon Powell. We ran into this a few years ago when Madison was Cook's backup, which is the right role for him, where people wanted to trade him. I don't know like what we think we're getting back for trades for a guy like that, but you'd rather just have a veteran player who's good and who can play for you. He could be your punt returner. He could be a wide receiver in certain situations. You're not getting anything for him. Conditional 7th players like that are everywhere across the NFL. And as far as Thayer Thomas, practice squad is a possibility. I know they talked about him quite a bit. I didn't see much from Thayer Thomas this year that made me think, oh yeah, you have to find a spot for this guy really anywhere, but maybe practice squad ends up being the thing for him.
Yeah, I could see Thayer Thomas sneak into the practice squad. You don't even have to sneak him to the practice squad. You could cut him and sign him to the practice squad without anyone putting up a fight. I think they like him enough. I think he could stick around. I think Lucky Jackson and Thayer Thomas would be a couple of good practice squad receivers for you. It could give you a nice look, but I don't know how strongly they actually feel about a guy like that. I think they like him, but I don't think it would break their heart either to kind of just say like, thanks for the past 2 years, buddy. Going back to Brandon Powell real quick. I think fans just like the idea, and this probably comes from like the culture of playing Madden growing up or 2K, like where you just think you can trade guys you don't want for like assets in the future. I do this sometimes, like when I would play 2K, I'd be like, well, let me trade my 10th, 11th, and 12th man for a first round pick in 2026. And then the computer AI is so dumb, they would say, yeah, that sounds great. Real humans are smarter than the Madden video games we play. No one's giving you anything of value for Brandon Powell. And if they're willing to give you a 7th round pick, like Brandon Powell is probably more valuable than that conditional 7th round pick based on all the things he does. So yeah, if someone was like, we'll give you a 3rd round pick for Brandon Powell, I think they would rush to the phone and make the deal. But that's not possible.
Okay, let me ask this, though. If there is a position where they look for help, whether it's picking up somebody else's player that they drop or look for some sort of trade, what position do you think that would be at?
Offensive line. I think that if there is a surprise cut interior lineman who's played a little bit of football or has some experience under their belt, I think they would bring that guy in to compete with Ed Ingram for that right guard spot. Ed Ingram was playing football last week, against the Cleveland Browns. I think they want to like Ed Ingram. I think they've put a lot into Ed Ingram with hopes that he could develop into something. But I still think that there are question marks about Ed Ingram. So I don't know, I couldn't name you a guy, but if a guy with X amount of games started under his belt gets cut on Tuesday, I could see them deciding to at least, do some recon on the guy, maybe consider bringing him in, because I still think the interior offensive line needs a little bit of help. It always needs a little bit of help. It's a recurring theme for this franchise pretty much since I've lived here over the past 15 years. And it's a theme once again this year. So yeah, offensive line is probably where I look if they decide to bring in, a guy that gets cut on Tuesday.
On day 1 of training camp, it looked a lot better for the depth of the offensive line than it does right now. Yeah. Because you thought that, Dan Feeney and Dalton Reisner will be solid veteran backups who will maybe push Ed Ingram, but Reisner and Feeney both banged up, and we just didn't see a whole lot of either one of them. And then the backups, Tyrese Robinson has had his moments. Michael Juergens, I think, has looked okay out there, but may not have the strength at this moment to play in the NFL for more than a game or two. That's going to need to be developed over the next couple of years. they're very short at that position,
Yeah.
especially if you need a backup center. And if they're going to cut Feeney, or even if they keep him around, but he's still banged up, because we saw him at training camp just kind of walking around, not doing anything, wasn't in the padded practice. So is he healthy enough to play week 1? Is it just a precautionary thing, or are they happy with him as far as a backup? That's hard to know. Reisner does not feel like he's going to be here going forward. That is kind of a fall from somebody we thought was going to compete for a job and never did. And Ingram, his 2 preseason games were nothing short of horrendous. And I don't know that that projects to the regular season. We were just talking about how little they care. Maybe he was annoyed to be playing out there, but that's just a fact of the matter. Through 2 games, I believe he was the lowest graded pass blocker by PFF through those 2 games at guard, which kind of tracks with the whole rest of his career.
Yeah,
I totally agree. They need to look for somebody. Okay, just real quick, have to throw this one out here from Sizzleman. Stop with the kicker hype. Gary Anderson made every kick until it mattered. Wait, what happened? Can you explain this to me? The great kicker, Gary Anderson, he had made every kick until when? That didn't happen. I don't know what you're talking about.
If Will Reichard was Gary Anderson, that would be good. That would be good.
One of the greatest kickers of all time.
Yeah, I get it, Vikings fans. I get it. PTSD with the kickers. But we can hype up a guy. Like, this guy looks like he's legit. And I'm sure everyone will say, like, I told you so. If he's not, told you, I'm willing to stand on that. I think he's going to be a really good kicker in the league. If he was Gary Anderson, Vikings fans would be so lucky.
Yeah, it's one of the best ever. But also, by the way, just going to toss this out there. You could be born after that happened with Gary Anderson and rent a car. It's just, that's how long it's been. You are old enough to rent a car. Will Reichard was born 5 years later than this happened. I'm not saying let it go, because I know that all of you will never let it go who saw it happen in 1998. And yes, I do actually know what happened in 98 for any of you who didn't pick up on the sarcasm there. But you know who doesn't until you tell them is anyone who's 30 years old. Even you would have maybe not even been old enough to remember it at this point, having actually seen it, because I was only 12. So if you were 30, you'd be 4. That's that's where you'd be right now. I understand how something hurt you, but it doesn't really project anything about Will Reichard or have any impact on Will Reichard unless there are multiple dimensions, and one of them had something happen in another dimension that twisted Vikings kickers to make them miss at the biggest times. You know what's funny is when Greg Joseph makes a 60-yard game winner, or Kai Forbath makes one in the Minneapolis Miracle to allow it to be possible. Everyone's like, who cares?
Yeah, we don't think about those.
The clutch kicks since Blair have been fine, I think. And, I just don't think it has any impact on a kid who's maybe 23 years old, who has had a really good training camp. Let's do this. Put the final word on preseason and training camp. It's over. It's all over. We're going into cut down day. There's not that much intrigue of cut down day, as in big names that could be gone or big trades that could be made. So we have a 95% confidence on what this team is. So give me your total takeaway of all of it.
You said final word. I'm going to say 4 words. Thank God it's over. Thank God it's over. And I mean that, because thank God September 8th will be here before we know it. But also, thank God the past 2 months are over, because this has been an incredibly trying time for this franchise. And I think once games start, you can kind of start the process of turning the page on all of it. And I'm not saying let's forget Kyrie Jackson this season. Let's let him his memory live on. Let's celebrate him throughout the year. But I think thank God it's over is what I'm going with, because I am excited for us to actually be able to turn the page and not talk about how hard of a training camp it's been. And I think the Vikings deserve credit for the way they've navigated this really, really hard training camp, which started with unspeakable tragedy. But I think like now we get to kind of move forward in a way that you get to start kind of seeing the fruits of your labor for all the hard work you've put in and all the things you've overcome over the last two months. So thank God it's over. September 8th will be here before we know it. And I cannot wait for that.
It's a really good summation. I'll put it this way. The tragic thing that happened with Kyrie Jackson started off training camp in such a way that you could feel everyone carrying that. And I think through the entire season, they still will be carrying that with them. And then I don't want to put them in the same category of just say this happened and this happened and this happened.
Right.
Because a player passing away is in so much of a different life space for everyone, is so much more of an impact thing to everyone's psyche and everyone's emotion when you meet a guy, he's joining your team, he's an exciting young player, and then to have him pass away the way that he did, that's something that will shake you to your core, unlike an injury where you go, all right, the guy's coming back. So put that one in its own, it's just on its own. The other things that happened, Mekhi Blackmon getting hurt, JJ McCarthy getting hurt, those also would have a real shaking element to everybody inside the building. And those will be remembered as these bad things that happened during training camps. Like, oh, then they lost Blackmon and then they lost JJ McCarthy. And that was supposed to be your top corner. And that was supposed to be your quarterback who was going to come in and be so exciting at some point during the season. And that left a black cloud over the entire thing. Mm-hmm. But a lot of other things for them. So this is kind of like saying outside of Gary Anderson's kick, 98 went fine. But this is true that many other things for them went the best way they could have gone. And I mean, the way Sam Darnold performed during training camp, his connection with Justin Jefferson, Addison's banged up, but it's not maybe that serious. The players that we saw emerge, how Dallas Turner looked, how some of the players on defense looked, being able to add someone of Stephon Gilmore's caliber at the last moment, and feeling like Ivan Pace might be ready to take another step. The interior of the defensive line, getting Levi Drake Rodriguez, but also Jerry Tillery had a very good training camp, and seeing someone like Theo Jackson emerge and seeing someone like Will Reichard emerge. A lot of players have had really good training camps, and they are maybe in the best possible position outside of Blackmon and outside of JJ McCarthy. But McCarthy wasn't going to swing the win-loss record, I'm guessing, by a lot. And Gilmore replaces Blackmon. Aside from that, you have about the best version of your team that you were going to get for week one. And then Jesus take the wheel after that. So we'll see what happens. But it was kind of a two-pronged thing if we put Kyrie Jackson understandably aside. Like, yeah, the injuries were to two of the players. You would have said, please don't injure that player. Take anyone else's ACL or anyone else's meniscus, but not those guys. And that's how it turned out. But the rest, a lot of very good things happened for this team that bode well for the immediate and for down the road as well. So that's how I'm going to leave it. And then Tuesday, when there's the cut down day, it is Tuesday. Yeah. Yep. Then we'll do a reaction. And I think Thursday is when the brass is going to speak. So we'll react to that as well and chat with all you guys. Have plenty of interviews and different things this week. So it is an exciting time to be ready for some football. Dane Mizutani, thank you so much. Please go do something with your day that isn't talking about a preseason game. And I suggest all of that for you guys as well. So thanks so much for watching / listening, and we will see you all very soon. Football.